Hello, welcome to Contentstack Live. I'm your host, Jeff Baher, along with my assistant, Alex Garbertini. Joining us today is Dean Haddock, Product Manager here at Contentstack. Dean, welcome to the program.
Hello, thanks for having me, Jeff.
So, topic today, eliminating friction and delays in digital experience delivery. Maybe let's just start with the main components of digital experience delivery. Like we hear a lot of terms, front end, back end, headless CMS. Can you maybe just like orient us? Where's the front? Where's the back? What's the head? How's this all kind of coming together?
Yes, that's a good question. I think depending on where you sit and where you're looking at it from, it might look more like spokes on a hub more than like an end-to-end supply chain. But for for ease of talking about it, let's say on the back end, you have things like your inventory database, your CRM, your payment processor, all kinds of different stuff, maybe even tools like AI, machine learning, and those kinds of things. You'll have some kind of database architecture, usually somewhere, and then you'll have like your content management system. You'll have tools like that. And then as you move further away from those sort of back of house systems and data warehouse tools, you start moving more toward the front end where your website is. But it might even go further than your website. You might have like Internet of Things and, all kinds of really far out futuristic stuff where we'll end up, sometime in the months and years to come. So that's why I say it might look more like a web sometimes, depending on your perspective. But, you got hardware all the way to the front end where your website is.
So there's also a lot of talk about composable and oftentimes contrasting it to some previous monolithic system. So is this different now with what you described? How are things changing between the back end and the front end?
Yeah. So, when you're thinking monolithic, a lot of those things that I mentioned coexist in one system or they are one system. Even tools like more traditional, let's say monolithic CMS, a lot of times those themselves, they're built on lots of different components, but they're stitched together in a proprietary way so that like what you get is what you get. Contrast that with composability, all those different like parts of that supply chain I mentioned could come from different suppliers. One or two of them might be something that is really close to your business, so you build it yourself or it's very proprietary. You'll use a tool like Contentstack, right? Like a headless CMS as one component of that. You'll have some front-end hosting solution. Usually if you have a website, if you were deploying a mobile app, you wouldn't necessarily need that front-end hosting solution. And then all these tools to extend it, stitch it together, have APIs talking together. And what's really beautiful about it is like you can really finely tune and finely tailor the tools that you need, the ecosystem that you need to meet the exact outcomes that you're looking for, right? You don't have to contort your outcomes into a different set of outcomes to meet your technology. You can have your technology really speaking to the outcomes you desire.
But you're seeing that a lot more now. Is it that there's a stronger drive from our customers to create things that they can't with the current technology? I mean, just as you described it there, they're pulling from a lot more technologies seemingly to do more things or things they haven't done before. Is that what you're seeing?
Well, yeah. I mean, so just in the last few months, we have AI is now, one day we all woke up and it was a thing and we were going to have to deal with it. Now, what's very cool about Contentstack, and I didn't work on this particular project directly, right? But the composable nature even of our architecture and our platform, we were able to build and deploy not only for our own purposes, but as a tool that our customers can use, a ChatGPT integration. And so really like a monolithic competitor, for example, someone who's not playing in the composable space, might be so proprietary that integrating with a tool like that would be extremely painful. It might be a month-long process. They might have to re-architect or refactor certain components. They might have to figure out, where in their interface a tool like that even belongs or how to leverage it. Whereas with Contentstack, like our systems were ready for it because of the way that we think about systems and even composability across our own platform and network. So we can provide those tools very, very quickly for customers. And when you are composable, whether it's a composable business like Contentstack, or you're a company leveraging composable tools, you're closer to solutions when emergent technologies come out. You're much closer. So you can move at the speed of the market. You're not waiting for your monolithic provider to catch up with that market.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the friction. So did it already exist? Or is it something that gets introduced because now of what you described, people going composable, people going headless? Or is it that it's exacerbated by this? Or like, help me understand like where the friction then occurs in this supply chain that you're kind of referred to.
Yeah. So where to take this? So I think I mentioned my academic background was in economics and game theory, and how that applies to technology and what I do professionally is an interesting story. We won't go there today.
No, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Maybe over coffee one day.
Yeah.
I mentioned the supply chain of the digital experience. That's really the way I think about it, is kind of like an assembly line almost of like early automobile manufacturing. And at each step in that supply chain, things are changing hands. The product is getting added to, enhanced, changed, edited, whatever. When we're talking about the digital experience supply chain, let's not talk about car manufacturing. I'm not an expert in that. You have even before the data exists, you have concepts that are part of this, and there's handoffs, there's transactions of this asset, of this thing that's eventually going to become content that's published online, or a piece of a larger batch of content that's going to be published online, or even just the interface is part of this experience too. There's design involved, there's information architecture involved. Even the parts that you can see and touch go through processes like this. This is nothing new. As long as there have been markets, as long as there have been materials put together to make goods and services, you have friction. And economics, we call this transaction costs. And what's maybe a little bit mystifying about composable is that it doesn't just eliminate friction for you out of the box because you went composable. What it does is it gives you control over the friction so that you can pick to add or remove friction where you need to add or remove friction. There are some things you want to do in your supply chain that are high friction. Like you want your legal team to stop a piece of content and look at it and read it to make sure that it's in compliance before it goes to the next stage. That's a high friction touch point. It is necessary. What you don't want is your engineering team being siloed, often in some other building, not really talking to your content managers, using completely different tools, completely different system, very esoteric. Maybe both sides perceive each other as ivory towers, and all of a sudden you want to deploy a piece of content because there's an emergency press release that goes out, and somebody's got to wake up in the middle of the night and do all kinds of things and take 8 hours. That kind of friction is the kind of friction we're talking about. It's like unnecessary, low value or value subtracting friction in that process.
Very interesting. So maybe you could bring it a little bit closer to some of the products, Contentstack Launch in particular. So I know we introduced this front-end hosting, not to kind of geek out so much on the technology, but around this idea of the supply chain and the frictions, and really, like you said, like allowing you to be in more control of the friction or of controlling the friction. Like help us, like talk to me about Contentstack Launch and kind of what we're doing there and how that kind of helps pay that off.
Yeah. So, and this is why I like friction is a good term, but I think sometimes it's a little bit abstract. I really like transaction costs, just to borrow from that school of economic thought for a second, because costs, right? We all know what costs are, right? You don't want to be spending more than you're making. You don't want extra costs that you don't need, those kinds of things. But these costs can be monetary and non-monetary. So the amount of effort that it takes to get from one stage in the supply chain to another, so to go from draft to publish, or to go from my content's ready in my CMS, but now I got to get it on the front end. It's the ballooning of effort, or even just like maybe it's interpersonal friction. There's communication friction that has to happen back and forth. Somebody didn't understand the directive quite properly, have to redo it. That is the kind of friction we're talking about. So Launch is very, very cool because first, fundamentally, one of the biggest, I guess, transaction costs in mounting up, migrating over, booting up your next gen digital experience. Let's say if you're migrating from a monolith over to Contentstack, or you're migrating systems, or you just want to like start to get things running more smoothly and lower these transaction costs. One of the first places you're going to feel that is in procurement. And so one of the things that Launch does that is so, I think, novel and unique is not the technology so much as it is the proximity to the rest of the tools that you need, fundamentally, the pillars you need for digital experience. You've got your CMS, where your concept lives, your assets live. You've got your automation tools and extensions. We have Automation Hub, where we can like route data and, do loop routines, we can update things, we can change things in workflows, streamline that like infinitely. Well, now you have Launch, your front-end hosting, and in and of itself, it's a container where you host your front-end website and it delivers a very low latency, very high performance caching, all of the things that you demand and expect from a modern front-end headless hosting tool. That is what it is. Outside of that, the main point of friction here that we eliminate first is the procurement friction. And it may sound like not that big of a deal, but some businesses are on 30 to 90 day, buying cycles when they procure a new piece of software. And it's got to go through lots of different reviews. It's got to be approved, contracted, negotiated, all that sort of stuff. Well, if you are leveraging Contentstack's suite of digital experience tools, composing them together within the same environment, you'll be stitching together other things too, but your core pieces are talking together, but you're already ahead of the game and can get to market faster with your new project, because right out of the gate, you don't have to procure two things at once or procure one and then the other. You've got a tool that's just ready to go with your front end.
You kind of mentioned faster and time. And I know I saw a really cool video of a side-by-side comparison that we did on stage. I think we'll be showing it again. Just showing kind of the old approach, the new approach, but what are we talking about here? How long could this take in terms of like just how much friction when you're talking about just the hosting component as an example? Like, this is the difference between kind of a couple minutes versus a couple hours, or this is like a multi-month, like some parts of the kind of assembly of the experience, like could take a few months for this kinds of things to come. Yeah.
Yeah. So hosting is an interesting one, because when it works well and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, nobody thinks about it. And when it's not working, everybody knows about it. And it is something that you really want to kind of disappear into the background of your digital experience. Sort of like your car engine, right? You're not really thinking about it until it's not working. I'd say it's a really good parallel with the front-end hosting tool. Now, for headless hosting out in the market, there are a lot of really great companies that are you can move very quickly with. And what may be more challenging is deciding what tier to go with and figuring out, licensing and whatever you have to do to get through the contracting with that. But other things equal, headless hosting is headless hosting. Bringing it closer to us, though, we've got two, with the addition of that one contracting reduction in friction. We also have all of this friction that happens between the CMS and automations and those sorts of things that every modern digital experience is going to need too. And because of that proximity, we can introspect, that maybe an esoteric term, but we can see what's happening in those different systems from the perspective of each one of those systems. So, for example, one of the really great features of Contentstack or of Launch, excuse me, is that we can just instantly connect to your stacks in the CMS and import your environment variables. And that's not a ton of friction for a website. Like most other companies or other providers out there, you would, import these or copy and paste them into some interface. We can do that faster in fewer clicks, but we also, because we do that, we don't have to have developers sharing lots of different credentials, for example. Or if somebody leaves the company, we don't necessarily have to go and figure out all the sticky notes where they were keeping their API keys. We could just recycle those API keys really quickly and just redeploy the site, and it works very quickly. We also have automation hub connectivity with Launch, so we can, if you're using pure static site generator, you can trigger a redeployment when a new piece of content goes live, for example, or conversely, a new deployment goes out when you want to run a process in automation hub for a third-party system, or do something else, like as part of your supply chain, whatever your build process is, wherever you're pulling your content and assets from. You can manipulate all those things, and then boom, they just sort of move from one part of our ecosystem to the other, but it's still composable.
Yeah, that's super cool. So there's a lot of things then for the builder and the architect to kind of think through here. I mean, there's just, I think, the physics of bringing together the different vendors and how much, the handoffs that you kind of like spoke to, and the benefits of maybe having fewer of those handoffs or controlling what those handoffs are. But yeah, I'm curious where you think this will kind of take us moving forward, right? So there's clearly, I think, the guidance to provide around like the procurement kind of strategy. There's also the technology kind of glue. You obviously picked up on, the headless CMS, the role of automation hub to kind of bring together the integrations, and then like the front end hosting component. You actually even touched on AI from like, where do we go from here from that perspective? Like what do you see kind of in your crystal ball?
Yeah. Well, I'd say I had a really good crystal ball. I don't know. I probably would have made some different investments. So I don't know that I'm the right person to pull out my crystal ball here. But, I mean, I've been working in technology and product for a really long time. And, one thing is certain is that it's going to continue moving forward. I think we're going to see, I think there's going to be a bit of I don't want to call it a bubble, but certainly a ballooning of AI and ChatGPT type tools, machine learning and so forth to, optimize and solve a lot of problems with like big data sets. And big data is not like anymore. It's not like I've got a lot of records in my database. Big data is like I'm parsing very rich data on all of my customers, and I have to do that in near real time because it's going to inform what I recommend to them as their next product purchase and things like that. I think we're going to start approaching, I don't know, I'd imagine it's a bit of an asymptote. Like we'll approach a point where things are just working and very convenient and easy in terms of like how we interface with businesses online, tools online. They're going to get smarter and more intuitive. So, this Zoom call, for example, would like start with like, hey, you're about to meet with Jeff. Your hair doesn't look quite right. Do you want to fix that? Or something like that. I would say that sort of intuition in maybe a slightly uncomfortable way for old-fashioned people such as myself is going to happen for a while. But then I think we're going to figure out what we like about that as a species and what we don't. And, some stuff's going to stick. Some stuff is going to be like, oh, that was weird. And then we're going to just move on. That's really more around the content and experience angles. Technologically speaking, where we're going is closer and closer and closer to the end user in extremely low latency, very close geographically computing and data access and asset access and availability. And I think when a lot of people hear that, they think, oh, so it's going to be faster. And like, yes, it is going to be faster, but a lot of the potential innovation in technology is only held back from the resources that we have available at any given moment, right? Like ChatGPT, for example, is not, it's a technology that could not exist until certain conditions emerged. And so when we get to this paradigm shift where right now, I mean, edge computing is projected to be, I wish I could remember. I wanted to say it was something like 4.5 billion projected market over the next, I think, like 2 years.
It's huge growth for sure.
Huge, right? I mean, that's probably way low. As we get closer to like edge computing, where things are happening like in the browser or very, very close to the browser, the things that we're going to see being done, I mean, like, I'm sure we could sit here and spitball some ideas of things that might happen, but when you mix that with the inference engines that drive like ML and AI, and then you start to mix that with tools like Internet of Things, VR, AR, digital signage. I mean, there's a not unterrifying potential future that could create. But again, I think like I have a lot of faith in humanity, and I think we might see some weird stuff as we progress at lightning speed over the next several years. But I think some stuff will stick, some stuff won't, and some of it will just be like, that was weird.
Yeah, I think that's a great viewpoint. The edge computing is really interesting. I've spent many years on the infrastructure side, so a lot of a push around moving compute closer and closer to the user. But I think there's an interesting intersection of not only moving compute closer, but you're moving the experience closer. And the closer you move the experience, the more contextualized, the more personal it can become. And I think that drives a lot more of the technology decisions, but we're moving, I think it seems more from like compute on demand to almost like experience on demand. And that then enlists everything that you just rattled off there. And a big part of that is like getting it out to the edge as close to where that experience needs to play out. Great stuff, Dean. Yeah. Like I mentioned in the beginning, like I think there's plenty of topics to have you come back and talk about just the supply chain, the friction, just how, as you said, like humanity, things were kind of self-level. It'd be great to just continue to have you come back to check that and see where we really are in that continuum. It's super fascinating.
I would love to, Jeff. This has been really fun, and it's an exciting topic. It's sometimes a daunting topic, but the headline, I think, just from Contentstack and where we sit in all of this is really just trying to, I think, provide the tools and options for folks to create whatever they want. It's like a palette. It's a toolkit, a kit of parts. It's like I imagine my little artist toolbox. I open it up and what do I want to use to create the next thing? And you said it right. It's experience. And like, we no longer think in just websites anymore. There's a whole ecosystem out there where content can appear, and we're going to be part of that. Launch is one part of that, but it certainly isn't the end.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, just the program is Contentstack Live. We have a small but growing studio audience. I wanted to check with Alex if there's any questions. Just kind of comes out there from the voice of reason, I think. But yeah, Alex, did we have some questions that came in while we were chatting?
Yeah, we had a few come in. One question: if I use Contentstack for my headless CMS, do my developers now have to use Launch?
Oh yeah, so no, not at all. And that is in our DNA. I mean, as much as these tools share DNA, and it allows us to do really, really cool things, and save you a lot of time and effort, in stitching these components together and even integrating other components, it's one option for you. And it might be, I would guess, it might be the best option if, your C-suite is telling you need to mount up a new microsite campaign for this new opportunity, and you don't know where to start, but you got to get a CMS connected to a front-end hosting tool, and it's got to be done in 2 weeks. This is your tool for that. But if you want to
get Alex, right? Never heard that question before. How did that ask?
But no, you certainly don't. You have lots of options out there. Contentstack, other tools, even Automation Hub will continue to play very kindly with the other folks out there.
Yeah, it's a good question. I was wondering that just in the, are we going back down to create our own monolithic DXP? And you kind of answered that we're always going to give you the choice. There are some things that we provide that we think might make some good sense for you, but that's not, you're not required to do that. And at any point, you kind of an escape hatch, right? To kind of do what you want to go do and however you want to go do it.
That's right. Like, we are no more monolithic than AWS is monolithic, right? Like, you don't have to use all of AWS's, 2,500 products. I don't know. I haven't checked it today, but that's where we're talking. Yeah. There's been a couple created during the podcast. But yeah, we are, you use the tools that you want, leave whatever else you need to on the table, and it'll be there if a need does emerge.
Awesome. Another question, Alex?
Yeah, here's another one. You mentioned framework-agnostic. What does that mean? And is Contentstack Launch for websites only?
Yes, so framework-agnostic is, so not unlike AWS product, there are myriad JavaScript frameworks, front-end development frameworks. Next.js, really popular. Gatsby is another really popular one. Nuxt is a popular one. SvelteKit, Levity. I could probably, if I really stretched, name a dozen of the 3 dozen or more that are out there. You can use any of these on Launch. And I know we didn't have time for a demo today, Jeff, but I'm sure folks can find one somewhere floating around on our digital space. But you simply connect to your repository like GitHub, and you put in your build commands and output directory, which if you're a developer out there and you're using tools like this, you probably know what I'm saying. Jeff, you and I probably don't encounter these as much, except for Inspires and working on the product. But in that build command, that's where you would put your framework specific build commands in your output directory. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you leverage Launch. Framework agnostic is one such flexibility. And then the other question that you asked was,
yeah, it's a website only, right?
Website only.
Yeah.
So, no. However, a front-end hosting tool for headless CMS is fundamentally most of the time anyway, used to deliver front-end website experiences. Like Contentstack.com, for example, is a headless website, and the front-end website is being hosted on such service. You could also host an app or an API, and because our pricing and entitlements are really very generous, you could easily spin up like an API or middleware or some kind of connective application that's really specific to your brand or your needs. And
kind of behind the scenes.
Exactly, which is weird because like back end is front end. But it is, yeah, you could use it for an application, you could use it for an API and all that kind of stuff. But you wouldn't, let me just be very clear, you wouldn't deploy an app to the App Store, like to the iTunes App Store or Google Play or something like that through a tool like Launch. That's categorically not what this is.
Yeah. Definitely want to take you up on many more episodes. I think a demo would be great. But thank you so much. I think you just helped kind of paint a really good picture of kind of the lay of the land, where things are going, the roles of some of these different technologies. Yeah, unless you had any other parting words, I just want to thank you for your time. We have, for our listeners out there, we do have a show notes, so be sure to check that out. We'll be able to point you to different links, any other good Contentstack Launch information we'll be sure to put there. But Dean, thank you so much for the time today.
Jeff, I loved it. Always enjoy chatting with you when we have the opportunity. And I'm just looking forward to a lot more. So for those folks listening, watching, I would say just stay tuned. We've got some really fun stuff coming. So we will surprise and delight.
We even include, I think, your contact info for people who want to reach out to me, after this program. Feel free to do that. That's another great resource out there for you all to take advantage of. So with that, again, thank you, Dean. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everyone on the production crew out here, and we'll see you all next time.
Be sure to check out the show notes for relevant links and content. To learn even more about the power of going composable, head to contentstack.com.